and he's going to need security. And so the Dallas Police Department's going to have a role in this, and we're going to tell you how they prepare for the president. Now, he was going to visit Dallas on November 22nd. When do you think, how much advance do you think the Dallas Police Department got on his trip? About 10 days, not quite. On November 13th of 1963, November 13th, excuse me, is when the Dallas Police Department had been officially notified of the president's visit. Yes, Nick?
I just looked it up, and $100 in 1963 is worth $774.
Here, that's gonna, I'm gonna note that. So what do you say, 774?
Yeah, 50 cents.
So it was not, it was not a cheap plate at that time. Yeah.
Will, like in our notes, are these things strictly under their preparations, the police department's preparations today, or are we going out with
Oh, we'll be clear through it today. We'll be all of them. Okay. Anyways, on November 13th, 1963, the Dallas Police Department had been officially notified of the president's visit, and the Dallas Police Department had also received the exact motorcade route the president would travel during that 11 miles through downtown Dallas on his way to the Trademark. And that motorcade is going to be from Love Field in Dallas when he lands to the Trademark where he gives his luncheon speech, 11 miles. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later. Now, after the Dallas Police Department received the news that the president was coming and what his exact motorcade route would be, they did the following 3 precautionary measures preparing for his trip. So after the Dallas Police Department received information that A, the president was coming to Dallas, and B, they received his exact motorcade route, these are the 3 things they did for precautionary measures. Now, the first thing they did ties into kind of some of the concerns that Kennedy's aides had. What the police department did is they made checks on all extremist organizations, right-wing organizations, and right-wing individuals that were in the Dallas area. In other words, they found out where these right-wingers were and what they were doing. So they made checks on all known extremists, right-wingers, and their organizations, and kind of kept those organizations and people under surveillance because they didn't want them to do something that would embarrass or harm the president. So the first thing the Dallas Police Department did is they made checks and did surveillance on all known extremists and the organizations in which they belong to, such as the John Birch Society that we talked about, etc. The second thing they did is they assigned over 400 police officers to the Dallas detail the day of the president's visit. The Dallas Police Department assigned over 400 police officers that would be on duty the day the president visited on the 22nd of November. So they're going to take basically every officer they have in the Dallas Police Department and tie them into the president's trip. Okay? Now, if you were the Dallas Police Department, what might else you do with the information you know? Besides check on those extremists and those extremist organizations and hire extra police officers for security. What else might you do now that you know the information I mentioned? You would check the route. Very good. And Dallas Deputy Police Chief would be like the Assistant Police Chief, a fellow by the name of Ray Lundy, was responsible to make a detailed inspection of any possible hazards along the president's motorcade route. So Dallas Deputy Police Chief Ray Lundy was responsible to make a detailed inspection of any possible hazards that would be along the president's route. So the 3 things the Dallas Police Department did following precautionary measures after finding out the president was coming is 1, they made checks on all known extremist organizations and extremist individuals in the Dallas area and kept surveillance on them. 2, they assigned over 400 police officers to the Dallas detail for the day the president would visit. And 3, Dallas Deputy Police Chief Ray Lundy made a detailed inspection of any possible hazards along the motorcade route. Now, on Saturday, November 16th, Dallas newspapers, all Dallas newspapers, published the parade route for the public to see. Now, that would not be something you would do today. And because of what happened in Dallas, a lot more precautions are going to be taken concerning the president's visit anywhere once we get through this scenario. But it wasn't uncommon at that point, so I wouldn't want you to think, oh my God, what were they doing? And conspiracy theorists just grabbed this, and of course, that's part of the conspiracy. There's no question that this was not unusual. So on Saturday, November 16th, Dallas newspapers published the route. Why? The president wants people out there. He wants a crowd. He wants people to know. You wouldn't do that today, but that's what they did then. And then final preparation, so to speak, is on Wednesday evening, November 20th, a couple days before the president came. On Wednesday evening, November 20th, Police Chief Jesse Curry got on local television and radio and made the following statement to the people of Dallas. So on Wednesday evening, November 20th, Police Chief Jesse Curry, here's Jesse Curry right here if you're interested in seeing what he looks like. Police Chief Jesse Curry got on all local television stations and the radio, and he made this statement to the people of Dallas. He said, quote, "Because of the unfortunate incident which occurred here during the visit of Ambassador Stevenson, people everywhere in the world will be hypocritical of our behavior. Nothing must occur that is disrespectful or degrading to the President of the United States. All law enforcement agencies would do everything within their power to ensure that no negative accidents or incidents occur. He is entitled to the highest respect of all of our citizens." So what Jesse Curry's doing is getting on television and radio and telling the people, we expect you to treat the President of the United States with respect when he's here. And we're going to be under the microscope because of what happened to Ambassador Stevenson during UN Day. So let's be on our best behavior. That was his point. So they really are trying to make every precaution necessary to make this a successful experience for them and the President. Okay. That'll take us to our next subtopic then, which is San Antonio, Texas, because I told you that the president was going to go to Florida and Texas to inspect military installations. He's already been to Florida and back to DC, and now he's going into Texas for his Texas tour, and the first stop will be San Antonio, Texas. Well, it was on Thursday morning, on November 21st of 1963, that President Kennedy and his staff left Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland for the trip aboard Air Force One to Texas. On Thursday morning, November 21st, President Kennedy and his staff left Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland for the trip aboard Air Force One to Texas. Remember, the day before, he pardoned the White House turkey, and he and his wife entertained Supreme Court justices and their wives at the White House. So the next morning, they get up, and Kennedy brings his entourage. They leave Andrews Air Force Base, where they store Air Force One, and they begin their flight to Texas. Now, among the passengers traveling to Texas with President Kennedy would be Mrs. Kennedy. Now, this would be the first time that Mrs. Kennedy traveled with her husband since he was elected president in November of 1960. She did not travel with him from that point on. So it would be the first time that Mrs. Kennedy would be accompanying her husband on any kind of a political trip since he was elected president in November of 1960. Keep in mind, what is she still recovering from? The death of her son and the recovery. So this was kind of a big deal that she was going to travel with him for the first time since he was elected president in November of 1960. Well, we'll get to that. It's a good question. It's a very good question. Well, she was a real quiet, private person, but the president really wanted her to come on this trip because he wanted to make a good show. And you will find out in a lot of instances that Mrs. Kennedy was often more popular than the president. Okay, and that's a very good point, Susan, good thinking. Now, President and Mrs. Kennedy arrived in San Antonio at 2:30 p.m. on November 21st. President and Mrs. Kennedy arrived in San Antonio at 2:30 p.m. on November 21st. And they met Vice President Johnson there, who had actually flown to Texas earlier in the week. So the Vice President had come earlier in the week, and he met the President and Mrs. Kennedy in San Antonio when they landed at 2:30 p.m. on November 21st. Now, the reason Kennedy was going to Texas was to inspect military installations. So what he was doing in San Antonio is he was going to inspect a new aerospace medical center. He was going to inspect a new aerospace medical center, and obviously he was going to give a speech while he inspected. So in San Antonio, the President's schedule included inspecting a new aerospace medical center, and his plan was to give a speech there as well. So he goes to this aerospace medical center, he gives a speech, and when he finished, he decided that he wanted to visit nearby Brooks Air Force Base. So after his speech at the new aerospace medical center, he decided he wanted to check out something that was going on at Brooks Air Force Base in San Antonio. And what was going on at Brooks Air Force Base was an experimental procedure. And I'll explain to you what that was, but he had some personal interest in this experimental procedure that was being administered by the Air Force at Brooks Air Force Base in San Antonio. So he gives his speech, and then he decides to travel to Brooks Air Force Base because he wants to check out an experimental procedure that he has some personal interest in. Now, the experimental procedure that was going on there was a procedure that was designed to test the effects of pure oxygen on a person's lungs. Okay? The experimental procedure that was going on at Brooks Air Force Base was designed to test the effects of pure oxygen on a person's lungs. How would you see how that affected a person? What's that? Go ahead, what did you say? Right, and that's what they did. They actually had 4 volunteers from the Air Force, they were members of the Air Force, that they locked in these chambers to see how they reacted to breathing pure oxygen in their lungs. So this was an experimental procedure that was taking place at Brooks Air Force Base in San Antonio. They had 4 Air Force, members of the Air Force that volunteered to breathe in this pure oxygen and see how it would affect their lungs. Now, the man that was overseeing this experimental project was Dr. Bill Welch. Dr. Bill Welch was the man that was overseeing the project. And so who did President Kennedy visit with about the experimental procedure when he got there? Dr. Bill Welch. So Dr. Bill Welch was overseeing the project, and he was the one that President Kennedy visited with about this experimental procedure. The President also took time to speak to one of the 4 Air Force members that were taking part in this experiment. And the one he chose to spoke with was just 17 years old. And his name was Philip Flip Jameson. So the President visited with Dr. Bill Welch and talked to him about this experiment that they were conducting at Brooks Air Force Base. And he actually went in and visited with 17-year-old Philip Flip Jameson. He was an airman that was serving at Brooks Air Force Base who volunteered to be part of this experiment. He was one of 4 that were in these chambers breathing in this pure oxygen to see how it would work on their lungs. He was just 17. In those days, it was kind of an interesting scenario. When I was 17, if you were kind of a dope in high school, the counselor would bring you in and say, you know what, Cody, you're not getting anything done academically, you're kind of a dope, you're not really paying much attention, so I got 2 options for you. Why don't you go join the Air Force? Because they could use a few good men, and they'll whip your butt into shape, they'll fix you up, your bad discipline and everything. Or old Otto Bendewald is hiring down at the standard station down there, the gas station. They'll go down there and, you know, check out, go get a job. That's what they told you in those days. And I'm not sure it wasn't that bad of advice at times. But in those days, the Air Force and Army, you didn't have to have a diploma. That's kind of where misfits went in a way. They've changed totally now. They're interested in, you can't even get in without a diploma now. But that's how it used to go. So I don't know anything about 17-year-old Philip Jameson. But if he was in the Air Force at 17, something was up, okay? Well, anyway, President Kennedy visited with Jameson, and he was very complimentary. And he said, I appreciate your service to the country. And he said that, you know, your willingness to volunteer for your country for this experiment that you really don't know much about is kind of what I meant in my inauguration speech. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And that really stuck with him. And you'll get a chance to see who this guy is and get his take on the president visiting with him when I show you this video. But Philip Jameson was very taken back by the president's visit. And he was so taken back that he complimented him in saying that this is exactly what I was talking about in my speech. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Can you imagine what Philip Jameson's feelings were 2 hours later? Or 3 hours, not 2 hours later, but the next day when the president was assassinated? Can you imagine the impact that would be? Well, anyway, as Kennedy departed this experimental chamber after visiting with Welch and visiting with Jameson, he asked privately to speak with Dr. Welch. Why would Kennedy have a personal interest in pure oxygen working in a person's lungs? Go ahead. He didn't have problems. Who had problems? His baby. Patrick was born so underdeveloped. I think he was wondering if maybe pure oxygen would have been put in that boy's lungs if something would have happened that could have saved him. So that was Kennedy's personal issue there. He wanted to know if this experiment, if successful, could be used in helping in the medical field. It was in direct relation to the fact that he and Mrs. Kennedy had lost their son Patrick to issues concerning the newborn's lungs. Okay, so that's why he went there in the first place. He wanted to find out about this, to see if any way this experimental procedure could be put in the medical field to help children with underdeveloped lungs. That was his trip. That's what he did in San Antonio. That was about it. Yes?
Was that like planned from the beginning that they'd go there, or was he just kind of like on the
You know, that's a very good question, Bailey. He was funny. He was a reactatory person. He didn't always do things. And when we talk about when he flies into Dallas, he was supposed to walk straight to the limousine. Well, they snuck off like a couple little kids and went all the way down the fence and shook hands. He would do things like this on occasion, so I don't think any of it was planned the Secret Service knew about. I think that he may have told them in advance, but not probably way in advance. Okay, Houston. So Kennedy finishes his business in San Antonio, and at 3:35 p.m., he leaves San Antonio for the flight to Houston. So he wasn't there very long. When did he land? 2:30, and he flew out at 3:35. So he wasn't there very long. He gave a very quick speech and then went to Brooks Air Force Base and spoke. He wasn't there a long time. So at 3:35 p.m., the president leaves San Antonio for the flight to Houston. Now, in Houston, the president was scheduled again to give a speech, but this really didn't have anything to do with military installations. A good friend of his, Congressman Albert Thomas, was going to be up for what? Like everybody else, re-election. Now, since he was a congressman, he was a member of the House of Representatives. And he liked Kennedy, and Kennedy liked him. So he basically went to Thomas's hometown, right, to do a little bit of campaigning for him and speak on his behalf. So in Houston, the president was scheduled to give an evening speech in honor of Congressman Albert Thomas. So they get on the plane at 3:35, 45-minute flight. They land approximately 5 o'clock in Houston, and they're met by a really large crowd. People knew the president was coming, so actually a crowd met them with a hope to see the president and the first lady at the airport in Houston. So they board the plane at 3:35, about a 45-minute flight by the time they get up in the air. They land in Houston about 5 p.m., and they're met by a large crowd there. And what do? They get into a motorcade, and About 30 minutes later, they arrive at the Rice Hotel in Houston. So they fly into Houston at 5. They're met by a large crowd. They get in their motorcade, which is a parade of cars. And after 30 minutes of driving, the motorcade with the president arrives at the Rice Hotel in Houston. Now this is where Mrs. Kennedy comes in to answer your question. So at the hotel where the president was staying, there was another organization that was having a meeting. The League of United Latin American Citizens were having a meeting at the Rice Hotel. An organization known as the League of United Latin American Citizens were having a meeting. What's the nickname for that? LULAC. They just went by LULAC. So at the Rice Hotel, an organization known as the League of United Latin American Citizens, or LULAC for short, were having a meeting. And what do you think they would really like to have at their meeting? The president make a short appearance. Would you not, if you knew he was coming? God, that'd be pretty cool. We're having a meeting here. Okay? So the organization requested through the Secret Service to see if President Kennedy could make an appearance at their event. And the Secret Service went and talked to the president, and he agreed to do so. This was, as Bailey was talking about, this was totally unscheduled. Totally unscheduled. So the League of United Latin American Citizens, or LULAC, when they found out the president was staying at the Rice Hotel, they requested through the Secret Service to see if the president would speak at their organization. And the Secret Service checked with the president, and he agreed to do so. Well, they kind of expected him to just kind of come in and say, "How you doing? Good organization, see you later." Well, they got way more